Hi, I'm Tina-Desiree Berg reporting for Status Coup, and this week on the Right Wing Insanity Report, we are going to be talking about dark money in our judicial system. Welcome to Walker Bragman, who is going to discuss this with me. Walker, I wanted to do this topic with you because you have a law degree, and also because you spend a lot of time doing research into dark money financing of various things. So this is an area I think that you're pretty much an expert in, so welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so this week, actually yesterday, ProPublica released a very deep dive into dark money that Clarence Thomas has been taking from a group that's associated with the Federalist Society, with the CNP, Harlan Crow, Leonard Leo. So we're going to get into who all these individuals are, why they matter. But I wanted to play an interview that Justin Elliott, the journalist who was behind this, did with Democracy Now! This morning, so he can give us a read on his piece, and then we'll get into a deep dive on it.
We're joined now by Justin Elliott, who co-authored the ProPublica investigation headlined Clarence Thomas and the Billionaire. Lay out what you found, Justin.
Yeah, well, what we found is that Justice Thomas has this extraordinary and apparently unprecedented relationship with this outside billionaire who is basically subsidizing his life. I mean, we're talking about trips on a private jet that charters for $10,000 to $15,000 per hour. Cruises around the world on the super yacht that you described, regular vacations with this billionaire and his friends, who in some cases are people that have either ideological or potentially financial interests before the court.
Well, explain what the rules are for Supreme Court justices.
One of the striking things here as we got into this is just how few rules there are, especially compared to other people in the government. I've friends who work in the federal bureaucracy who say they can't even, have somebody buy them lunch. Supreme Court justices have very few rules in terms of accepting gifts. One of the few things the law requires them to do is to simply disclose gifts, most gifts. This was a law that was passed back in the 1970s after Watergate. And Clarence Thomas, by not reporting these private jet trips and some of the other travel, appears to be in just repeat violation of that law, according to the ethics lawyers we spoke to.
So I wanted to read from your investigation. Thomas's frequent vacations at Topridge have brought him into contact with corporate executives and political activists. During one trip in 2017, his fellow guests included executives at Verizon, PricewaterhouseCoopers, major Republican donors, one of the leaders of the American Enterprise Institute, a pro-business conservative think tank, according to the records you reviewed. The painting of Thomas at Topridge, and so I want to show this for our TV audience, shows him in conversation, as we said earlier, with Leonard Leo of the Federalist Society. Explain who the other people are and what Topridge is.
Yeah, Topridge is this incredible, essentially private resort in upstate New York in the Adirondacks. It was actually built by Marjorie Merriweather Post, who is the same heiress who built what is now Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago about a century ago, to give you a sense of the kind of lavishness of the property. And this property is now owned by this Dallas real estate billionaire, Harlan Crow, and he regularly hosts Thomas there. And we're not talking about just sort of a lake house. It's a whole campus of buildings. There's a staff of chefs and waiters and that sort of thing. And, it's very difficult to find out who is on these trips with Justice Thomas. We were able to get the names of guests on one or two occasions. And even though Harlan Crow, told us in a statement that he and his friends are not trying to influence Justice Thomas, the people, for example, in the painting you describe, are...
And what is the sculpture behind them?
Yeah, it's a sculpture of a Native American man sort of with his hands outstretched. We're not really sure why it's there or what it's supposed to mean. I actually spoke to the painter who created the piece, and he said that in real life that sculpture is actually 2 or 3 times bigger, and he shrunk it in the painting for scale. But we don't really know why it's there or why they made the choice to pose in front of it. But all of the men in the painting, besides Harlan Crow, are conservative lawyers. People are active in one way or another in the conservative legal movement.
Of course, Leonard Leo, key to the choosing of conservative justices, especially under Trump.
Yeah, Leonard Leo has been very involved in creating the current Supreme Court supermajority, and Harlan Crow has donated to Leonard Leo's groups. And this is a guy who now has a war chest of I think over $1 billion. And again, when you look at that painting, it raises a lot of questions about Harlan Crow's statement that this is all about sort of friendship and just socializing.
All right, so right off the top, friendship and socializing, of course, that's his response. That's all of their responses, that this is all above board. We're just friends. We're hanging out, doing vacations together, normal stuff. But does anybody actually believe, Walker, that nothing else is happening there, that there's no planning, no quid pro quo, no, we all agree that we want right-wing extremist judges across the board. How do we make it happen? I mean, these are guys that are members of the CMP, the Council for National Policy, the Federalist Society. These are dark money groups that have had a big hand in, for example, overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, no, I think it's fairly obvious that, there's been a concerted effort to reshape the judiciary. I mean, going back even to the days of the Olin Foundation, setting up beachheads at prestigious universities, including Center for Law and Economics, which was sort of the law and economics movement. Basically says you should look at the law through an economic lens, have do cost benefit analysis and all that, and that was sort of a Trojan horse to injecting and legitimizing conservative legal principles, which at the point when this was happening were not really taken seriously, were considered sort of junk jurisprudence, like junk legal ideas, so there has been over the decades an effort by the conservative movement and by wealthy conservatives in particular, right, to reshape America's judiciary.
Right. It's about them reshaping America, right? So Koch brothers, all of these individuals that are extreme right-wing libertarians, it isn't just, Congress that they're after. They know that to really reshape the country in the image that they want, they have to go after the judiciary. So I thought this was a pretty damning report. I want to pull this up on screen. I want to go through some of this with you, and then I want to talk about some of the players involved so folks understand exactly who these individuals are.
Absolutely. We can do that.
Okay, great. So in late June 2019, right after the U.S. Supreme Court released its final opinion of the term, Justice Clarence Thomas boarded a large private jet headed to Indonesia. He and his wife were going on vacation, 9 days of island hopping in a volcanic archipelago on a super yacht staffed by a coterie of attendants and private staff. If Thomas had chartered the plane and the 161-foot yacht himself, the total cost of the trip would have exceeded $500,000. Fortunately for him, that wasn't necessary. He was on vacation with real estate magnate and Republican mega donor Harlan Crow, who owned the jet and the yacht too. So let's talk about Harlan Crow for a second. He's the lead guy in all of this, right? So he's kind of, I want to say, the kingmaker. He's the one that is hosting all of these individuals at his house. So not just Clarence Thomas, Leonard Leo, some others. Harlan Crow, so he's a billionaire, but I think it should be mentioned that it's his father that created this real estate empire, not him. He inherited it. He manages it now, but he certainly isn't, the guy that's like pulling himself up by the bootstraps, right? It apparently has $16 billion in assets. He's funded Jeannie Thomas's, so this is Clarence Thomas's wife. He funded one of her Tea Party groups with $500K, I found out. He sits on the board of American Enterprise Institute. This is a very right-wing neoconservative think tank. They're largely responsible for things like the Iraq War under George W. Bush. He also sits on the board of the SCOTUS Historical Society. He has, wait for it, I want to put this up on screen too, Colin. He has donated money to both Joe Manchin and Christine Sinema. The Christine Sinema donations, he actually exceeded what he was allowed to by federal limits, and the Sinema campaign had to return some of the money. So Colin, do you have that screenshot? I want to put that up so people can see this. There we go. So this is, the donations that he made to the cinema campaign. Again, they returned half of it because they exceeded the federal limits. But point being that this is a guy that mainly donates to far-right conservative Republicans, but he also found it in his heart to give money to Joe Manchin and Christine Sinema. I don't think that would be out of the wheelhouse for a guy that's interested in doing the things that he wants to do. So Harlan Crow, there's a rundown of who he is. What are your thoughts on this guy?
I mean, there are a lot of these like wealthy, inherited wealth billionaires who feel a justification that they need to sort of justify what they've got.
Right.
And I mean, look at the Kochs. Look at Charles Koch. He's somebody, he didn't make that the money. He inherited his fortune from his father. It's true that they did grow, he and his brother David, they definitely did grow the fortune that they inherited, but they inherited quite a bit of money. And of course they became prolific political influencers. And so, it's not really surprising. You see a lot of wealthy conservative individuals throw their money around. Really, I think what they're going for is to sort of start with the conclusion that this is the policy agenda we want. This is what we want America to look like, and let's make it fit. Let's work backwards. So they're going after places that would balk at that, like academia, where they say where in academia, ideas that work, those are the ones that advance, and the theory in theory. But when you start with the conclusion, that's fundamentally at odds with academia. They take to try to influence the media because, blast our message out there, and of course get the judiciary on their side because historically the judiciary has been a great force for social change. And this is
right, and in a direction that they don't like, right? They want it to go back in the other direction because a lot of them are Christian nationalists. Yeah, 100%.
Right, and it can't be overstated, though. I think that a lot of the playbook that they're following was laid out in the Powell memo.
Yeah,
in the
100%.
70s, written by Justice Powell. That for how billionaires and wealthy people can wage a counter revolution, and so we're seeing that play out, and we're kind of, I think, in the late stages of that. And they've made a lot of headway. They've unleashed money. They've established beacons of conservative thought at universities like Harvard and Princeton and Stanford. They've got their own media ecosystem. It still doesn't have the legitimacy, I think, that mainstream. It's still not mainstream, and they still don't have the cultural relevance that they want to have.
Yeah, but they don't actually need that, do they, Walker? We're really looking at minority rule right now, right? It is what they want, but they have enough power to move.
In order
things.
to make it permanent, they need it, and they'll never have it. And that's So yes, they cling to power jealously, and so that's sort of the very broad, very very broad contextualization, I think, of this story.
Indeed.
In terms of there is, of course, the issue of a Supreme Court justice, the ethical issues that arise under this, and any other federal judge would be off the bench. But because this is the Supreme Court
because it's
justice,
the Supreme Court, they have. How does it make sense, Walker? Let's talk about that. There are fewer ethics laws, rules, regulations, whatnot, covering the Supreme Court than there are any other federal judge appointee. How does this make sense? There should be stronger ethics, not none.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does make sense, and I think that stories like this highlight why it doesn't make sense. There has been a mythos that has been cultivated. I mean, it's cultivated at law schools around the country that the Supreme Court are just apolitical philosopher kings, kind of. They stand apart from politics. They stand above it, and in reality, I mean, they don't. They make up laws to suit their ideological whim, and you see that with the overturning of Roe. I mean, the decisions that this court has been coming out with have been panned by legal scholars across the country. Right. It just they do not make sense. And yet that's
the law of the land. It's insane, right?
Yeah. I had a professor in law school who said, what do we think of jurisprudence? Do we think of it as, principled reasoning by by judges, or do we think of the law of the land sort of as whatever any 5 justices say? That's what it is, and it's pretty clear, I think, now to most people that whatever 5 justices say, that's the law. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Precedent doesn't really matter. If they have a goal, they're going to force that, and they're going to do it, and that's a very
sort of where we're
dangerous
at.
thing.
It's
a dangerous thing because this country rests on the idea of that we have sort of enshrined in our system, that there are laws that fundamentally respect certain rights, respect like our that's the social contract,
right?
And the more they erode it with this activist right-wing nonsense, with judges who are hack judges like Clarence Thomas, who are just operating on behalf of what wealthy benefactors want him to do. And I'm not saying that he's not ideologically conservative. He clearly is, but the motivations for it are just
mind-numbing.
When you have trips like this, it calls into question what the motivation for your deeply held conservative beliefs are. Or do you really believe that, or is it that you're being paid and that this has been a boon to your career?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely optics of quid pro quo here. There's no two ways about it.
And I do believe, by the way, that Clarence Thomas is a true believer in this sort of jurisprudence. Although I do find it notable that he's okay going after same-sex marriage or whatever when it comes to the kind of jurisprudence that gave us interracial marriage. He's no, that's my line. It's not real until it affects.
Right, but he doesn't see how dangerously close all of these things are to each other.
Of course, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. Same-sex marriage.
And you're right. We threw precedents out the window. Yeah, with Roe v. Wade.
Anything. So. When you govern power is the only thing that matters.
Right. Yeah.
Anything goes, and you can use it to justify any position. We have control of the government. We are technically able to do this, so we're going to do that. It's sort of, the Republicans are sort of using government, and conservatives are using government in the same way that beta testers for video games use the game. They're trying to break it. They're trying to find flaws and
find
holes.
The flaw. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I think that's probably
ways
true.
And exploits. That's what they're doing. They're just doing it nationally and to the country, to your government. And they're
it's very destabilized. We are very destabilized at this point, and public trust is at an all-time low. And all of these organizations, whether it's SCOTUS, Congress, whatnot, they need public buy-in. They need public trust if they're going to function properly. And that is also part of the conversation. I think you're right on that.
Yeah, I love the conversation about from Democrats on the Hill. No, we can't do anything about Thomas, really, because if we do, then it'll erode faith. This was a reporter, came out with this same day as the story, said, there's little appetite from Democrats to do anything. It's because they don't want to erode confidence in the court anymore.
The confidence has already been eroded. If they do nothing, it's going to make it worse. Yeah, I agree.
All you're going to do is undermine faith in the other branches of government.
That's right.
Which is, by the way, the only check. You're supposed to have checks and balances.
You're supposed to check on SCOTUS, yes. Obviously, they've crossed a line. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the article, because this stuff has been going on, wait for it, 2 decades. Even though we're just hearing about all of this stuff now, this is not something that's just started happening recently. So for more than 2 decades, Thomas has accepted luxury trips virtually every year from the Dallas businessman without disclosing them. Documents and interviews show. A public servant who has a salary of $285,000. He has vacationed on Crow's super yacht around the globe. He flies on Crow's Bombardier Global 5000 jet. He has gone with Crow to the Bohemian Grove, the exclusive California all-male retreat, and to Crow's sprawling ranch in East Texas. And Thomas typically spends about a week every summer at Crow's private resort in the Adirondacks. Do I ever say that right? You're from New York.
Adirondacks?
Yes, thank you.
Adirondacks.
Never knew how to pronounce that word properly. The extent and frequency of Crow's apparent gifts to Thomas have no known precedent in the modern history of the U.S. Supreme Court. These trips appeared nowhere on Thomas's financial disclosures. His failure to report the flights appeared to violate a law passed after Watergate that requires justices, judges, members of Congress, and federal officials to disclose most gifts, two ethics law experts said. He also should have disclosed his trips on the yacht, these experts says. Thomas did not respond to a detailed list of questions.
He's got to go.
I agree.
Look, you cannot have, this is, the Supreme Court deals with cases, involving constitutional issues and that impact everybody. This is the same. If you were on trial and you saw the prosecutor give the judge like a bag full of money, would you think you were getting a fair trial? Because that is the equivalent of what we're seeing here. I mean, Thomas, this man is bought and paid for. Period. That above everything else. I mean, look, hell, who wouldn't be a conservative if you're living that lifestyle? If you're getting,
this is a lot of money here. We're talking about thousands and thousands, maybe millions of dollars over the years. Yeah. I
mean, again, I do think that Clarence Thomas, when you look at his entire career, you can't say that he doesn't truly believe in the conservative bullshit that he believes in. Am I allowed to say that?
Yes, you are allowed to say it. I think he does. I think he is committed.
He does. But at the same time, like, in terms of, some people believe that, they grow up believing that, and then they change their minds. There's no chance of any of that. There's no chance of this man tacking to the middle at all. We've seen Republican appointed justices become more liberal as their time as they spend time on the bench. Or just even
more committed to like doing the right thing, right? I mean, if you're a judge, you're supposed to have a certain lens of being at least trying to be unbiased, or at least committed to what the legal arguments are. And I think in the past we've seen, with him, there's no chance. And I think the same is true of Kavanaugh and some of these other new appointees. I think they're just completely political agents. I don't think they have any respect for being on SCOTUS. I think in the past, even if you had some of the Reagan appointees, I think when you get into that position, you feel the pressure of it, right? I'm now sitting on the Supreme Court. This is a very serious job. I need to be aware of that. I need to realize that what decisions I make, the things I say and do, matter immensely. The weight of that, right? I don't think these guys feel that weight at all. They are there because they are the traditional activist judges that these guys have been screaming about that never existed on the left. That's who these guys are, right? I agree with you.
Well, you have to understand that there's a mindset that has existed among very wealthy conservatives, who older wealthy conservatives, and I think has continued on in the next generation of very rich oligarchs, but that their ideas never really got a fair shake. That when the New Deal happened, it changed the country, and it made them the villains, and they weren't used to being the villains before FDR, but after FDR they were the villains, and they couldn't stand that. Not only do they feel entitled to the wealth, they feel entitled to your adoration. And I think that is and your respect, and that's that is a bridge too far.
It is a bridge too far.
But there has been, the conservative movement has spent there's been so much money thrown around to legitimize conservative thought in the mainstream and make it mainstream. And law and economics, by the way, has been remarkably successful at doing that, mainstreaming conservative legal thought. Frankly, should start getting rid of, conservatives want to get rid of like gender studies and prevent teaching of certain topics in schools. Well, we should see that. We should see a similar movement on the left to purge law schools of law and economics. This field of law and economics, which was invented to spread conservative legal principles. I mean,
law and economics should not be taught in the same.
Saying that you should purge this thought.
No, but I hear what you're saying.
This field should be understood as a Trojan horse for ideas that never would have been accepted otherwise, and for activist for conservative activists to start influencing law schools. And that's
right. There's a reason
like,
Charles
dangerous.
Koch is giving money to, these schools and asking for say over who gets hired, which is, in my opinion, conversation for a different day, but that is entirely unethical as well.
Yeah, but this is sort of the end result of that, right? Like you have these radical judges who are literally hobnobbing with the people who are trying to reshape
the country,
America's judiciary, and
maintain power over their money in politics, right? That's what this is all about at the end of the day.
They want to roll back. They want to unravel
workers' rights,
the social contract.
So 100%
completely, because they don't want to.
They're doing that.
I think fundamentally, if you get down to it, and this is just my take, fundamentally, I think you would see these people wanting acceptance for what they have, that they have it, and it's their right to have it, and
they want to
nobody
be admired.
can criticize the fact that they have it, because that's their right, and they shouldn't feel guilty. They should, they're a
bunch of babies, aren't they? That's true.
Yeah,
billionaire
they
babies.
They are. It's,
Yeah. All right. So
yeah.
Virginia Kantner. Oh, go ahead.
Forced.
Sorry.
He should be forced off the bench.
I agree.
There should be a full backlash to an equal and opposite backlash against this conservative infiltration of the law schools, of the judiciary, and you just don't see it.
You just don't see it.
People see it. The left is not organized in the same way because we don't have the same money.
No.
But they laid out the playbook.
They laid out as you mentioned, the Pell memo. All right, so Virginia Kantner, a former government ethics lawyer who served in administrations of both parties, said Thomas seems to have completely disregarded his higher ethical obligations. When a justice's lifestyle is being subsidized by the rich and famous, it absolutely corrodes the public trust. In Kantner, now at the watchdog group Crew, quite frankly, it makes my heart sink. ProPublica uncovered the details of Thomas's travel by drawing from flight records, internal documents distributed to Crow's employees, and interviews with dozens of people ranging from his super yacht staff to members of the Sensitive Bohemian Club to an Indonesian scuba diving instructor. So they did speak to a lot of different people. Federal judges sit in a unique position of public trust. They have lifetime tenure, a privilege intended to insulate them from the pressure and political potential of corruption in politics, which is obviously not working. A code of conduct for federal judges below the Supreme Court requires them to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Members of the High Court, Chief Justice John Roberts has written, consult that code for guidance. The Supreme Court is left almost entirely to police itself. So, you know what? So Chief Justice, he looks at that for guidance and throws it out the window because obviously they're not doing anything about any of this stuff.
No, but this is myth. It's a myth that these men sit and women sit above the politics of the day, of the era, that they can somehow separate themselves. And this is in every person who goes to law school. You get this. You hear this, like this ideal that the judiciary is somehow a unique and
sacred,
special branch, right, because it is separate from politics. It is decisive, and it is well reasoned and thoughtful, and it's all bullshit.
Yeah, apparently it is.
It is a political branch. It is as political a branch as any other, and it is more dangerous because of its separation from direct politics. It is absolutely more dangerous. These people have they have lifetime appointments.
They shouldn't. They should look at that. They should change that. Why do SCOTUS judges have lifetime appointments? It just doesn't make sense.
You should rotate the bench.
Rotate it. That's a good idea.
That was I hate to say it, but I think that was a Buttigieg idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about broken clocks or something.
Yeah, exactly. Look, somebody engineered in a lab has to be
right.
Has to have something.
All right, so
ideas that work.
Crow met Thomas after he became a justice. The pair have become genuine friends, according to people who know both men. Over the years, some details of Crow's relationship with Thomas's have emerged. In 2011, the New York Times reported on Crow's generosity towards the justice. The same year, Politico revealed that Crow had given $500,000 to a Tea Party group funded by Jeannie Thomas, his wife, which also paid her a $120,000 salary. But the full scale of Crow's benefactors has not been revealed. Long an influential figure in pro-business conservative politics, Crow has spent millions in ideological efforts to shape the law and the judiciary. Crow and his firm have not had a case before the Supreme Court since Thomas has joined it, though the court periodically hears major cases that directly impact the real estate industry. The details of his discussions with Thomas over the years remain unknown, and it is unclear if Crow has had any influence on the justice's views. I don't know. Is it? I mean, I get that they have to say that, but I'm going to say that they've probably talked deeply about all of these things.
Look, again, Thomas was a conservative coming up in law school. He's been a conservative his whole life.
Right.
But I have to say that it is fair for people to suggest that this influences him because, again, we have seen conservatives pivot and move to the middle as they spend time on the bench.
Right.
That has not happened to Clarence Thomas.
No, I think he's gone further to the right, quite frankly, especially now that he's joined and flanked by these other individuals like, Kavanaugh and Roberts, whatnot.
I think he has too, and I definitely think that you can say that there's no chance that he would ever pivot to the middle if your lifestyle is dependent upon you not doing that. It's just you don't even have to show that his decision making is influenced by this kind of subsidization from a very wealthy conservative billionaire. Because on its face, it's wrong.
Right.
It's sort of a prima facie. You just look at it and it's wrong.
It's wrong. Yeah.
You
don't need anything more than that. It shouldn't be allowed. I agree. I want to turn the conversation right now towards Leonard Leo. So at the beginning, when Justin Feldman was talking to Amy Goodman, they showed this photo, this painting, right? It's inside of Top Ridge, which is one of his real estate places where they're vacationing. The painting shows Thomas enjoying a cigar alongside Crow and chatting with other conservative power brokers like Leonard Leo. I want to talk about Leonard Leo for a second. Leonard Leo is part of the Federalist Society. The Federalist Society is a very right-wing extremist, I'm going to call them extremist group. They're associated with Council for National Policy, which is a Christian nationalist group. The entire point of the Federalist Society has been to shape SCOTUS and to make it a very conservative organization, and they've been at it for decades. I want to read...
not just SCOTUS. I mean, Federalists to shape judges, period. The Federalist Society is a right-wing organization. It's at pretty much every major law school in the country. And it's another way for the conservative movement to shape the next generation of judges and lawyers and Supreme Court justices. It's been very successful at getting its judges on the bench. It's got a lot of money behind it. A lot of wealthy conservatives fund the Federalist Society. It's just we don't. Back when. So Justice Earl Warren, Chief Justice Earl Warren, who gave us Brown versus Board, Loving versus Virginia, these historic decisions that really moved the country in a more open,
equitable,
free, liberal direction. He was an Eisenhower appointee.
Right, there you go.
But
yeah.
I don't think that with today's money being thrown around the way it is, that's possible anymore.
No, I don't either. I mean, they would think Eisenhower, conservatives right now would call Eisenhower a rhino, right? That they would not see him as a conservative, which is which is a sad statement in and of itself, truly.
But we live in a country now where everything is
political,
politicized,
and extreme.
I mean, the court, which never, I mean, to an extent, yes, the court has always been a political institution, but that has been cranked up to 11 by money.
By money.
And it wasn't it wasn't I really want to stress, it was not the liberal side that did this. There's been this myth that the conservative movement has promoted that their ideas were silenced by a liberal powerful liberal establishment.
It's ridiculous.
And that there needed to be a countervailing force to counter
Walker, you know why that
back.
is? Because in their mind, I think there's a really salient difference between these two groups. In the liberals' mind, they want to keep something like, okay, we're going to keep Roe v. Wade in place. That's more equitable to everybody. If you think abortion is wrong, you have the choice to not have one. If you think it's okay, you have the choice to have one. So this is a more neutral position to take as a judiciary, right? This is, to me, is not activist judge. It's just neutral. What the right wing is saying is that that's activist, when in reality, what the right wing is doing is now we're going to say what I think is morally correct, what I think is the right thing, that is now going to be the law of the land. And if you have a problem with it, tough titties. Like, that's their attitude, right? So before we were in a more neutral position, they want, but their idea of what is fair, what is just, is adopting Christian nationalist ideology. Really, that's the case. So anybody that's not in that world looks at that and thinks it's extreme and is like, wait a minute, hold on now. That's not right.
Well, it's just,
do you know what I'm saying?
I hear you. I think that it goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think that for wealthy men like Charles Koch, who has been a major force behind this, or, there is a sense that, like, we do have more money than everybody else, but we deserve it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And you shouldn't hate us for that, and
right.
and society is better because we have it.
I think you're right. That's true too. Absolutely.
And FDR really made the wealthy the villain. He wasn't afraid to say, "I welcome their hatred," and so for many years, that was a role that they were not wealthy individuals in America under the FDR were not prepared for that.
Right, and I also think that
industrialists.
Yeah, they sort of married their values to the Christians, though, right? So these two groups have now come together.
Well, there's been a marriage of Christian. I'm sorry, I cut you off. There's a little delay on my end.
Oh, I know. Same here. That's why I accidentally was talking over you too. Don't worry about it. What I was saying is that
no, it's all right.
These two groups are sort of joining forces now, right? So these right-wing wealthy libertarians
and have for many years,
right,
yes,
are kind of sapping up these Christian nationalists and utilizing them as their sort of foot soldiers in a way, convincing them that they have some sort of shared ideals, when in reality, if these Christian nationalists woke up and looked at what they were pairing with, they'd be like, wait a minute, this is problematic. But that's not happening.
Well, they've managed to they've married a bunch of groups who feel that government is the problem. They've got Christian nationalists who really want prayer in public schools, and they don't want abortion. And they see government stepping in and saying, we should have abortion, and we should be able to have, should not have prayer in public schools. And I think that's totally broken. Then they've got the good old, racists and folks who believe that civil rights legislation was an affront to our American way of life, or Southern way of life, or whatever, what have you. And at the same time, you've got capital, who sees government as a problem because taxes and what the taxation is theft, and so there. And by the way, there's a lot of overlap between these groups, right? Like, lots of overlap.
I think the Council for National Policy,
the through line.
Yeah, I think the overlap is really Council for National Policy, is where they all sort of come together and meet to try to change the political course of the country. In fact, I want to read, so there's a book called The Shadow Network that's about CNP. Really, it's Ann Nelson's deep dive into all of these groups and how they're intertwined with dark money. But I wanted to read this little passage about Leonard Leo because I think it's really important information historically of how we got here today, right? So the election of George W. Bush gave the Federalist Society cause to celebrate, Bush's two Supreme Court nominees, John Roberts and Samuel Alito, were members of the Federalist Society. According to an Alliance for Justice review, so were almost half of the appeals court judges Bush's White House counsel until 2003, when Bush nominated him for the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, a traditional stepping stone to the Supreme Court. So that's crazy, right? Almost half of the appeals court judges Bush appointed were Federalist Society judges. That's a big chunk of judges. Leonard Leo was one of the four horsemen of the Bush administration who advised the president on court appointments. The others were Sukalo, White House counsel C. Boyden Gray, and former CNP president and former Attorney General Ed Meese. In 2005, they formed a working group that came to be known as the Judicial Crisis Network. This organization was led by Carrie Severino, a former clerk for Clarence Thomas, who had been a member of the Federalist Society since the 1980s. Severino was a frequent guest on Perkins' Washington Watch. Her husband, Roger Severino, was the director of the DeVoy Center for Religion and Society at the Heritage Foundation. So, again, these things are all very commingled. They've been working on this for decades. That's the point I want to get across. And I think their first big wins did come with George W. Bush. And then now we come up into the Trump judicial appointings, and there's a through line here as well with Barry Seed, right? So, Colin, I want to pull up this article, How a Secretive Billionaire Handed His Fortune to the Architect of the Right-Wing Takeover of the Courts. This is also work done by ProPublica, which kind of talks about these players more in depth. In the largest known political advocacy donation in U.S. history,
I also want to just interrupt you for a second.
Yeah, go.
This was also my former colleague at the Lever, Andrew Perez.
Oh, is this Andrew Perez's piece? I'm a big fan of Andrew Perez.
Yeah.
Let's get a shout out to Andrew Perez. Whoop, whoop. Yeah. Andrew does great work. Industrialist Barry Seed funded a new group run by Federalist Society co-chair Leonard Leo. There's Leonard Leo again, who guided Trump's Supreme Court picks and helped end federal abortion rights. So going into the Trump era, we still have the same characters, right? All right, so the elderly, ultra-secretive Chicago businessman has given the largest known donation to a political advocacy group in U.S. history, worth $1.6 billion, and the recipient is one of the prime architects of conservative efforts to reshape the American judicial system, including the Supreme Court. Through a series of opaque transactions over the past 2 years, Barry Seed, a 90-year-old manufacturing magnate, gave the massive sum to a nonprofit run by Leonard Leo, who co-chairs the conservative legal group, the Federalist Society. The donation was first reported by the New York Times on Monday. The Lever and ProPublica confirmed the information from documents received independently by the news organization. Our reporting has additional highlights. Hang on, I gotta scroll down here. Has additional light on how the two men, one a judicial kingmaker and the other a mysterious but prolific donor to conservative causes, came together to create a political war chest that will likely supercharge efforts to further shift American politics to the right. So, again, this is, the Federalist Society has been with us decades. Every Republican president we've had, I'd say Bush Sr., I'm going to go back further, Reagan, has had, conversations with these folks. So where are we at now with Leo in your mind?
What do you mean? Where are we at? We're worse off.
Yeah.
We have a hijacked judiciary. We've got law schools teaching this nonsense law and economics, which I'm sorry, but I'm sure we're going to get pushback, and people are going to say it's legitimate discipline. And sure, out of the University of Chicago, where it originates, the law and economics movement is I'm sure it's a legitimate discipline to take over, to hijack the minds of young lawyers and judges and instill conservative legal values and principles. And it was always meant as a Trojan horse. It was easy. There's a quote. If you read the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer, there's a quote from one of these like wealthy individuals who's trying to get this implemented, a program for law and economics implemented at schools, and he says, like, it's easier to pitch law and economics. If I were going to pitch like conservative legal principles, I wouldn't even make it past the past the dean, but if you pitch it as economics,
which is
it's
crazy
a lot
to
easier
me.
to get through.
I mean, is it because
I'm absolutely butchering it because I don't remember the exact quote, but you should read the book.
I think, Walker, what I want to understand is, so law and economics to me is, it's not really science, let's be honest. They try to make the math work in all kinds of crazy ways. They try to argue that there's no suppressed moral claims in economics when there are clearly all kinds of suppressed moral claims in economics. I mean, if you're arguing we should put our pollution into the global south because it would cost us less money to do so, you are absolutely importing a moral claim there. That's not just about efficiency. So I think it's kind of wild that
Who was that? That was a real thing. That was like a.
That
real
was Larry
memo
Summer.
that went
Yeah,
yeah, it was Larry Summers. It's like, wait, I recognize that.
Yeah, that's example that always comes because it's such a perfect example of how these guys are clearly making moral.
Yeah, look, economic thinking has infiltrated every. I mean, it seems to have infiltrated every other discipline today, and that is, at least in terms of the legal discipline, absolutely intentional and a Trojan horse for right-wing values. But we saw it during during the early days of the pandemic, even with Emily Oster saying we need to apply economic principles to public health when it comes to closing schools to protect teachers and students. We need to look and really assess the risks and do a cost-benefit analysis. It's like you're dealing, which is it's insane. We're dealing with a novel virus that we know very little about. We know it's airborne, and you're talking about you're negotiating sort of how can we do as little as possible at a time when we should be. I have never seen economic principles applied in a way that delivers equity and justice, and I think that is the big problem here.
Oh, I think you're correct on that. So Ann Nelson, who is the author of Shadow Network, she also had a tweet out yesterday when this ProPublica piece hit. CMP Board of Governors Leonard Leo and dark money complaint. So Leonard Leo is now on the CMP Board of Governors, so he's made his way up, I guess, the ranks in that organization. And I want to read a little bit about this article that she posted because it's about some legal trouble that he is now in. So right-wing legal activists accused of misusing $73 million from nonprofit groups. A watchdog complaint filed with the IRS presents an accounting of the money paid to Leonard Leo's for-profit businesses. Leonard Leo, a right-wing legal activist, has raked in more than $73 million over 6 years from nonprofit groups that may be diverting money illegally to his businesses, according to a watchdog complaint seen by The Guardian. Leo is a hugely influential figure, said to have been the chief curator of Supreme Court nominees when Donald Trump was U.S. president. The devout Catholic is a staunch opponent of abortion rights. The Campaign for Accountability, a nonprofit watchdog organization based in Washington, has called for an investigation into 7 nonprofit groups linked to Leo that it said may be misusing millions of dollars for the personal benefit of insiders, a violation of their tax-exempt status. Shocking, 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 right? On Wednesday, the watchdog filed an Internal Revenue Service complaint dissecting 6 years of filings from the Leo-affiliated organizations and presenting an accounting of more than $73 million paid to his for-profit businesses. So I don't know where that's going to be headed. This is a new thing that just has happened, but he's also, it looks like, getting called into account for some of his financial dealings, as it should be.
I mean, it's great news. I just, you got to wonder, why you're so successful at what you're doing. Why risk it with illegal activity?
Because moving the needle, the needle of where the Overton window is as far as politics is concerned is more important to these individuals than anything else. And I think it's true that the same can be said of Charles Koch, right? That is, at this point, the thing that they're impassioned by, as crazy as that might sound. I want to play...
Yeah, but...
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
But you don't see Charles Koch getting pinged for illegal activity like this.
Yeah, but he's probably guilty of it, no?
I mean,
Like, would it shock you if it turned out something like this was the case? It would shock me.
Nothing would shock me coming out of that world, and I'm sure that you know, I mean, but like, I don't know.
All right. Well, I want to bring the conversation back around to the end here of where we started, which is with Clarence Thomas. So Harlan Crow, our lead guy that we were originally talking about, right? He's the friend that is kind of the kingpin for all of these individuals, the real estate mogul, where they're all the house they're meeting at, the vacation places they're meeting at. Harlan Crow financed a documentary about Clarence Thomas, because of course he did. I want to play this little clip about how Clarence Thomas describes himself as being regular stock.
You know, I don't have any problem with going to Europe, but I prefer the United States. And I prefer seeing the regular parts of the United States. I prefer going across the rural areas. I prefer the RV parks. I prefer the Walmart parking lots to the beaches and things like that. There's something normal to me about it. I come from regular stock, and I prefer that. I prefer being around that.
How is this real?
It's just shameless. It's shameless.
It is absolutely shameless PR nonsense. Really, you prefer the Walmart parking lot instead of these, which is why you go to these $1 billion, facilities every year, 3 or 4 times a year. Come on now.
Right.
This is just a PR stunt.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
But it doesn't seem like anything's going to happen to him. It seems like he's going to stay right on that bench.
No, I agree,
and keep
unfortunately.
handing down these horrible decisions. I really think that the only solution to this mess is for a progressive movement to get its people elected and start putting people in, build up outside in political infrastructure, get people positioned correctly in DC, and really start to undo everything that this conservative movement has done. Everything.
Yeah.
Not just we're going to win key battles. Work to undo everything, because that's what their aim is. They really want to undo the New Deal, all what's left of it. They want to undo the civil rights achievements that this country made. Yeah, they will not be content until they've rolled it all back. And so every inch that they've managed to gain, every inch of ground that they've gained, we have to win it back.
Indeed. All right.
Yeah.
I want to read, for just the sake of doing it, I want to read Clarence Thomas's response to the article. All right. Harlan and Kathy Crow are among our dearest friends, and we have been friends for over 25 years. As friends do, we have joined them on a number of family trips during the more than quarter century we have known them. Early in my tenure at the court, I sought guidance from my colleagues and others in the judiciary, and was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was not reportable. I have endeavored to follow the counsel throughout my tenure and have always sought to comply with the disclosure guidelines. These guidelines are now being changed as the committee of the Judicial Conference responsible for financial disclosure for the entire federal judiciary just passed this month announced new guidance. And it is, of course, my intent to follow this guidance in the future. So.
He had an opportunity to speak on record, and he didn't take it.
Yeah.
I always find responses like that hilarious. Like, the journalist reached out to you. You had multiple chances to give comment. If you didn't take it, that's on you. And now you come back with your tail between your legs. But it's unclear to me how much danger Thomas is actually in. Because yes, normal people are going to be looking at this and being like, he's got to go, right? But there's no system in place. There's no system.
Him. I mean, I want to highlight for a second the fact that
it's just not possible given the current political makeup. Like, the Republicans aren't going to give Biden another seat on the Supreme Court.
No.
Bring it back to 5-4. No way.
Yeah. The fact that Thomas didn't recuse himself from some of the January 6th stuff that clearly his wife was involved in, I think is also really bad. Like, he should have done that.
Yeah.
I want to read this one before we change topics. I want to read this text. Jeannie Thomas sent a text to Mark Meadows, 11/14/20, because I think it perfectly encapsulates the problem. She said to Mark Meadows, "The most important thing you can realize right now is that there are no rules in war. And this is war, and this war is psychological, psyop." So her ilk, her brand of right-wing extremism, they do think they're at war with the left in this country. That is how they see it, and they don't think there are any rules here. So it's this is his wife. I mean, how many people is he surrounding himself with that are telling us who they are we supposed to ignore?
Look, he shouldn't be on the bench, period.
I agree.
It's every day he sits on that bench is a disgrace to the reputation of the court. And we need politicians who are willing to say that. I think AOC called for him to resign. That's great. But there should be no holdouts here. It should be every Democrat in D.C. screaming their head off that this man has to be
honestly, I'm going to go even further. I'm going to say Republicans should have a problem with this too.
Republicans should, absolutely. Now, look, what Thomas is the most extreme example, but it's not just Republican justices who have taken these trips. Breyer took trips as well, but it's a problem.
It's a problem that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
It shouldn't exist. This shouldn't exist.
Period.
We need rules, and that should be the very least that comes out of this. There should be new rules for Supreme Court justices,
even more stringent. Yeah, and they need to get rid of lifetime appointments. This is ridiculous system. I agree.
It's a ridiculous system.
It's ridiculous. All right, now is time for my favorite part of the show, just because it's fun. We did the serious part. Now we do the fun part. It's our right-wing insanity roundup. This is where I go through some clips that came out this week, and we discuss them and many times have a good little laugh. So I wanted Scott Walker. Scott Walker is back. I don't know why he's back, but he's back, and he seems to be entirely out of touch. Let's play this clip.
The larger issue here, we've seen it particularly in Wisconsin, but across the country, is younger voters. In Wisconsin last fall, we saw about a 40-point margin that younger voters gave to the Democrats running for Senate and governor. We saw similar margins in Pennsylvania. Part of the reason why you have John Fetterman in the U.S. Senate, in Arizona, in Georgia, and elsewhere. And just this week in Wisconsin, we don't yet know the numbers by age, but we do know that Dane County, which is where the University of Wisconsin's flagship campus is at, about 50,000 students are enrolled there. Dane County cast more ballots in the race for the Supreme Court than the largest county in the state, Milwaukee County. And in Dane County, 82% of those votes went for the radical. And so unless we turn young people around, and it's not as simple as one campaign ad or some sort of a coalition, this is years of liberal indoctrination coming home to roost, and we've got to turn it around if we're going to win again.
I just can't. Okay, really? It's years of liberal indoctrination, or is it just your bad policy?
Right, here's the thing. Millennials came up in the post-subprime. Yeah, so millennials came into the job market in the subprime mortgage crisis economy. They watched. We've watched climate change accelerate. We've seen this country roll back basic human rights. We've seen the right wing move to an extreme that is frankly ridiculous. I mean, if we're I feel like when I was in high school, the Marjorie Taylor Greene would not have existed in right-wing politics, in mainstream right-wing politics. But now she's a member of Congress. So, I think that it's not young people. It's that your ideas suck. It's that your ideology sucks. It's that the what you want to do for the country sucks. And we see that. We don't want to go back to a repressed backward 1950s era. Like, society has moved on. Maybe it's moved on without you, and that's okay. And it's probably for the best. You know, we can't halt human progress to make you feel more comfortable with it. Like, that's not. It's so infuriating watching these washed up, stodgy conservative men like Scott Walker, like, lamenting millennials.
Okay, but it's not just the men. Because wait a minute, Walker, it's not just the men.
No, I know.
Because my next clip is Michelle Bachmann.
Sure. Look, their big fear, I think for a lot of conservatives, their big fear is that they're losing touch with their kids.
Yeah.
That they're going to lose their kids because they don't agree with the direction that society is going on certain issues, and their kids do,
Right.
and they can't talk to them about it, and they feel like there's this growing distance. And that, look, I don't agree with their views. I find a lot of those views repulsive, especially when you get to the transphobia. The bigotry is repulsive, but I can understand. It's at least understandable that there is a human concern here, that you'll lose your family or whatever. But you're doing that.
He's the one pushed. Their policy is pushing kids away. The fact of the matter is, kids cannot make financial ends meet. They can't get savings. They can't afford college. This is the natural outcome of having bad policy. But these folks can't see the fact that they've had bad policy. That the fact that Scott Walker was one of the biggest union busters out there. I mean, come on now.
Look, the Republicans tell us constantly the government is bad. We don't want government.
Right.
We don't want government. And millennials have been a generation that have come up, and Gen Z are generations that have seen what an absence of government does, and how an absence of government doesn't work. The subprime crisis, the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, we've seen how neoliberals handle crises, and they don't work. And climate change, we're all looking at climate change like, what's the plan here? And they don't have a plan. There is no plan. The plan is drill, baby, drill. The plan is we're all
going to die. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's terrible. And then
it's why the youth is not voting for them. Yeah, you're right. But Scott apparently has no self-awareness and can't understand that.
Yeah,
so
he's Skinner from The Simpsons.
He's Skinner from The Simpsons. That's exactly right. So in urban planning, Walker, there's this idea that is talked about smart cities, right? Meaning, if it's a smart city, is where you can have everything you need within a certain area, so you don't have to drive 2 hours to get something. It makes sense, and it's nothing nefarious or scary. But Michelle Bachmann, she's found a way to make it scary and nefarious. Let's play this clip.
So it's really a leash, an electronic leash. You see where this QR code comes in on our phones. This contains people to an area that is no more than 15 minutes from home. And what they're promising is that these are smart cities, so-called smart cities, where individuals will be tracked and traced and surveilled. And we can move about freely within 15 minutes from home. Now realize, in the former Soviet Union, their people were allowed to go 50 miles from home. Any further, they had to get permission of the government. So this is the move of totalitarianism, where there's a limitation on freedom of movement. In the United States government, under our Constitution, every American has the right to travel. So this is clearly an unconstitutional move in America.
What in the fuck is she talking about, dude?
Somebody needs to
You don't have to stay within this. You can go wherever the hell you want, Michelle. Where is she getting all this craziness from?
Somebody just needs to wrap the blanket around her shoulders and put her back to bed. Like, oh my God. Like, what are you?
I know.
These people, I'm sorry. I've reached a point where, the facts have to come first. Facts have to come first always. But I've reached a point where I'm so tired of entertaining and treating seriously these ridiculous, nonsensical,
it's nonsense.
right-wing bullshit. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't feel that people who, journalists should treat this seriously. I mean,
I agree with you, because none of it's true. Smart cities aren't forcing people to be in a certain area. You're allowed to leave. That isn't the point of any of it. Like, it's just, this is such a bastardized, crazy, paranoid version that it's just like, wow. What?
It's just beyond, I mean, like.
It's beyond belief.
Yeah, like,
all right.
I'm sorry. How are we supposed to react to that?
I don't know.
I mean, if this
laugh. We're supposed to laugh. Honestly, you're right. You had it right. Nobody should be taking these people seriously at this point because it's just ridiculous. All right, Anna Perez. This is like a young right-wing commentator. I hope that she doesn't have a large audience because holy shit. Let's play this clip.
Is this worse?
Now, you might be thinking, Anna, who cares? It's just some dumb movie. But you should care, and here's why. Because what they are doing is they're trying to brainwash society to think that that's how women are supposed to be. And this is dangerous because then we have women who go out there who think they're men and they wind up getting hurt. They wind up getting raped. They wind up getting, because this is, who's going to consume this content? Well, young kids, right? It's a cartoon. Adults, unless you're a loser, you're probably not going to want to watch that, right? So unless you're watching it with your kids. But the reality is this has actual ramifications on society. Young women see stuff like this and it just brainwashes them to be a feminist, to be a badass feminist. And it's not realistic. Women are not as strong as men. Women aren't the ones who are going to go out there and be like, watch this, let me kick ass. This like badass bitch culture is actually ruining women and it's ruining society and nobody knows where they stand anymore. So actually it has real consequences. I'm sick and tired of seeing unrealistic things like that. Please make her a helpless princess again, okay? That's a lot more fitting for Princess Peach. Sorry, someone had to say it.
Okay, Anna, just because you're uncomfortable and don't know who you are does not mean the rest of the womenhood does. Like, this is the most dumbest shit I've ever heard anyone say. So, you know what she's really outraged by is the Super Mario Brothers Princess Peach character.
Oh, of course. It's something that. Well, look, is that worse or better than the green M&M? Like the.
Oh, all right. I mean, it's on par.
Like Princess Peach in the Mario movie is too strong.
But
and
she's a strong girl. I mean, really? Is that really like you really believe that, Anna? Come on now. I'm sorry. I've never been a damsel in distress. I don't want to be a damsel in distress. I'm perfectly fine being a badass bitch. You do you, Anna. I'll do me. None of this is dangerous. This is
why young people reject conservatism.
I agree.
This is why young people don't want to go back to the 1950s. They want more out of their lives, and they should. And that's not bad. Parents, for fuck's sake, parents should not be trying to create a world where their kids are as ignorant, fearful, and maliciously stupid as they are. Like,
I agree.
Jesus Christ.
All right, so now we're going to have Nick Fuentes telling us why we actually need fascism.
Well, he's the absolute worst.
The only thing that a president should ever be charged for, ever, is things like corruption, treason, murder, and even then, I would even say maybe not even murder. The only crimes a president should be charged for are crimes against the country, because at that point, you've ascended to a different level. It's not to say that the president's better than us. It's not to say that he's above the law, but it is to say that he becomes a part of the fabric of the society. This is why you need fascism, okay? I don't call myself a fascist, but that's fundamentally what this is about.
Okay, Nick, you absolutely are a fascist. I don't care what you call yourself. And you are basically making an argument that the president should be above the law, and you're totally flat out wrong.
Why does anybody pay attention? I mean, the context here, he's obviously a ridiculous caricature of a fascist. But what's scary is that he's hobnobbed with, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, he's got an in with like, yeah, he had dinner. Up. Didn't he have dinner with Trump? Am I wrong?
Yes.
Yeah, he had dinner with Trump. Wrong. These, like,
I'm not sure that they got along, but that's. But we'll leave that for another day. But yeah, he's been around a long time on the outskirts of the alt-right movement. I think what's catapulted him into being paid attention to is the fact that he was, running the Kanye West, the Ye campaign for president. So
whatever happened with that?
I think it's still sort of puttering along. Obviously, it's, not anything that anybody's going to take seriously beyond the comedy that came out of that for like 3 or 4 weeks, which is really tragic, actually. And then let's end with this. Well, let's end this segment with this clip. Then we're going to do a flashback right-wing insanity with 2 clips. But this is, maybe these guys will just all self-destruct.
Really quick, since you were just there, but Mayor Adams described New York as, quote, his home. How did his home look? Pretty neat and tidy?
No, his home is disgusting. I compared it to what I called Gotham City. The streets are filthy. They're covered with people basically dying on drugs. They can't even stand up. They're falling over. There's so much crime in the city. I can't comprehend how people live there. It was repulsive. It smells bad. And I think it's a terrible place.
Okay, that's not where they're going to self-destruct. That's my next clip. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene on New York. I wanted to play this because she's making it sound like Gotham City.
You're in Midtown. What the?
I know, right? I'm like, what? Okay.
Like, I mean,
this is not the Bronx in the 70s. What are you talking about?
It's just so obvious that that she's lying and like making stuff up that her base wants to hear, and like it's sad. It's really, oh God, it's an embarrassment that woman is in Congress.
I know, and we have to pay attention to her because she is in Congress. Okay, now let's play the one where they're all going to self-destruct. Sorry, my bad.
About this, leave my gas stove, my air conditioner, my light bulbs, red meat, SUV, and especially my toilet paper alone.
What?
Hannity is like, he wants to eat all of the things that make him sick. He wants to be able to blow himself up. I'm like, all right, you can have all that. Nobody's coming for it. Do what you want, and if it harms you, that's on you.
Yeah, but the toilet paper thing, now that's an image I'm not going to be able to get out of my head for.
Yeah, I don't. Let's not go to the toilet paper thing. All right, now I'm gonna do this new thing because I think it's really important for people to have some sort of idea of. This is not our first time at the rodeo, right? Right-wing insanity has been with us since the dawn of the country. It truly has. So, new segment, this day in right-wing insanity history. Obviously, we're not picking today as the day, but these are 2 clips that came back, 10 years ago. So the first one, Demon Sheep. Let's play Demon Sheep.
Purity, piety, our fiscal conservative leaders. Men we admire, aspire to be. Wholesome, honorable, true believers. Men like Tom Campbell, who would never lead us astray, his pedestal so high.
Leaving but one way to fall. Tom Campbell, fiscal genius. Who would remember that as the governor's chief budget officer, Campbell was the architect of our disastrous 2005 budget? A budget so bloated with increased ongoing spending commitments and borrowing that it literally set the stage for the recent decline of California. That's fiscally conservative, Tom? Who would remember that was the Tom Campbell budget? We would. A budget about which the respected nonpartisan California Legislative Analyst Office wrote, multi-billion-dollar operating deficits will persist, even in the best of times. And Tom, while proclaiming your newfound fiscal conservatism, you seem to have forgotten that you supported last year's budget, saying its tax increases were the right thing to do. Your current brilliant solution to California's budget mess is to raise our gas tax. Already the highest in the country, by 32 cents a gallon. Could there be a worse solution? Is that fiscally conservative, Tom? And sadly, we're just getting started. You also campaigned for a ballot measure last spring that would have extended a supposedly temporary hike in the sales tax, the income tax, and the vehicle license fees for another 2 years. At the end of the day, that's another $16 billion in new taxes you supported, Tom. When in Congress, you supported a tax on the internet, and you were publicly critical of the Bush tax cuts. I suppose we should not be surprised then, Tom, that you are the only Republican candidate to refuse to sign the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. no matter what office you were running for that particular week. Tom Campbell, is he what he tells us? Or is he what he's become over the years? A FCINO, fiscal conservative in name only. A wolf in sheep's clothing. A man who literally helped put the state of California on the path to bankruptcy and higher taxes. Fiscal conservative? Or just another same old tale of tax and spend, authored by a career politician who helped guide us into this fiscal mess in the first place? Might there be a better choice? Someone who has not made a career of politics, a political outsider, perhaps a proven fiscal conservative who has accomplished enormous things in life. Now that sounds like the right choice for California.
Sorry, I had to show my fiance that is an amazing ad. I mean,
it's classic. Carly Fiorina. She was the CEO of Hewlett Packard. So this was like May 2015 when this ad first ran, and everybody was like, "What the fuck did I just watch?"
Wait.
So forget. You've heard of a dino. You've heard of a rhino. Now we have a no.
Wait, no, that didn't run. That couldn't have run in 2015 because that was like, no, that was like what was?
Yeah, 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Oh my.
May 2015. All right, so one more before we call it a day, a night. Who remembers I Am Not a Witch?
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. None of us are perfect, but none of us can be happy with what we see all around us. Politicians who think spending, trading favors, and backroom deals are the ways to stay in office. I'll go to Washington and do what you do. I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message. I'm you.
No, you're not me because I'm a witch.
I just when that ad came out, the Republican strategists were mortified. It's just a terrible.
They kind of were.
Yeah,
you're right. You're right. It was a bad ad.
Oh my God! In hindsight, how wonderful!
It's still classic.
How wonderful!
Yeah, 2010. That was 2010. Christine O'Donnell. She was running for Delaware, I believe, right?
Yes, I believe so. Oh man, I remember.
Yeah. Anyway.
I remember when that came. Oh my God!
It's funny stuff. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining us on Right Wing Insanity. So Friday is our new time slot at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 Eastern. Thank you, Walker Bragman, for joining us this evening and giving us your insight into dark money and legal aspects. We appreciate that. If people want to keep up with your reporting and whatnot, where's the best place to go? Twitter?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter, or you can sign up for my newsletter, which is on Substack, which apparently I won't be able to post to Twitter anymore.
What's your Substack?
Importantcontext.substack.com.
Okay.
And then, yes, you should download the opt-out news app, which
Excellent.
is on iOS and Android.
Yes, and Status Coup is part of opt-out, so great app. So this is an independent news app, so if you want to have be able to have all your favorite channels there on your phone, you can watch daily content from Walker and a few others created this great app called Opt Out. All right, thanks for joining us, Walker. Appreciate it, and everybody have a fantastic weekend.